Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. A very warm welcome to our launch event of the Playbook on Digital Social Protection Delivery Systems towards Dynamic Inclusion and Interoperability that we organize in collaboration with socialprotection.org. I think I'll just give it a few extra seconds to make sure participants can join, and then we'll start the webinar. Thanks for coming in. I can still see the numbers going up, so we'll give it a few more seconds, perhaps. So welcome again. As I said, we are going to launch the Playbook on Digital Social Protection Delivery Systems towards Dynamic Inclusion and Interoperability today. And I'm very excited for this. It's been a long joint journey. During the next 90 minutes, you will first hear from us and our partners in a panel discussion on a modular DSPDS, so Digital Social Protection Delivery Systems, if you hear that acronym again. So DSPDS framework for a holistic approach to data management, analytics, and decision support to scale up the delivery of social protection to people. I'm very honored to have with me James Rigolini, Senior Advisor for Social Protection and Jobs from the World Bank, Tina George, Senior Social Protection Specialist, Luis Albero, Senior Social Protection Specialist, Ana Lucia Cardenas, Social Protection Consultant, and Conrad Daly, Senior Counsel, all of them from the World Bank. And then we will have two distinguished discussants, Andres Chamba, Social Protection Specialist at the World Food Programme, and Anita Mittal, who's the Senior Advisor for Social Protection at the GIZ. They will share their views during our panel discussion. I'm Veronika Bozak. I'm Social Protection Policy Specialist at the International Labour Organization, and I'm today's moderator. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. And we would like to be this webinar very interactive. And we hope you have plenty of questions that will arise from the presentation and discussions, and we encourage and invite you to use the Q&A box on the Zoom panel. Don't forget to indicate if your question is directed to a specific speaker or if it's just a general question that anyone could answer to. And also feel free to introduce yourself and share any resources through the chat. So the welcome, we will hear from Jamila Rigolini, who's, as I said, the Senior Advisor for Social Protection and Jobs in the World Bank's Social Protection and Jobs Global Unit. His areas of expertise include social protection, jobs, human development, climate change, poverty, and skills. Prior to joining the World Bank, he was an assistant professor in economics at the University of Warwick in the UK, where he taught classes on development economics and economic growth. At the World Bank, he worked on social protection, jobs, poverty, human development, and climate change across several regions. In addition to managing lending operations and technical assistance programs, he also worked on several regional and global flagship reports on social protection, poverty, social cohesion, and jobs, in close collaboration with other international organizations, academia, and think tanks. Jamila Rigolini holds a diploma in physics from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich and a PhD in economics from New York University. In addition to his policy work, he remains active in research and has published in leading academic journals, including the Journal of Public Economics, the Journal of Development Economics, Economics and Politics, Economic Letters, the Journal of Development Studies, and World Development. He's fluent in Italian, French, English, Spanish, and German.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the first thing I should do is to shorten my bio. So having said that, it's a pleasure to be here. It has been a long journey, but it is really an impressive outcome what came. And it's great to be able to share it with all of you with socialprotection.org. And we really hope it is going to influence the way we design social protection systems. Now, before passing the word to the presenter, which is the meat of the discussion, perhaps it would be useful to frame a little bit how I personally see that. I see that towards a journey, I see the product helping a broader journey of improving the effectiveness of social protection systems. And digitalization is a very essential element of improving the effectiveness, but it's also a tricky one because we have very often new fads, new elements that are, yes, interesting, but they actually help at the margin. They don't necessarily affect the system itself. What is really interesting in this tool is that it really speaks about the core of digitalization and the system, the interoperability, the data management, the case management that can really help integrating efforts in a much more effective way. So I see that the value added is really into that, into the speaking how to improve the core of a social protection system. Now, when I say that I see that as a journey, it is because I would like perhaps to add two elements to it. The first is that sometimes we see digitalization as an end to itself, and actually, as the toolkit says, it should not be an end to itself. It should be a way to improve our service to people. We shouldn't lose the people-centered focus. And I don't know if some of you saw the Ken Loach movie, My Name is Daniel Blake. We need to really avoid that the system takes over the human interaction. The system takes over the ability of actually social workers to consider elements that may not be captured by the system. And that interface between the system and the people is perhaps an area of investigation where we need to deal further. And the second point that I think is important, and again, the tool stresses very much, is that you cannot just go digitalization galore without having the fundamentals in place. You need IT people, you need the right legislation, data privacy, you need actually the capacity to maintain your system. This seems trivial when said, but very often we perhaps are a bit too enthusiastic and we start building systems that then may not be sustainable over time because the fundamentals are not there. So this idea on how to actually develop the system gradually, how can we really build upon efforts, is an important one we should keep considering. Just to give you an idea, we speak about Bolsa Familia, Chile, the Chile Social Registry. These are programs that took 20, 25 years to build. Even Pakistan, I was just looking yesterday, the cash transfer program had an interesting expansion during COVID. So it really showed what a shock responsive system is. But we started support the collaboration with the government in 2007, 2008. So it is a 15-year effort to bring there. So we should really keep in mind that this is a journey, a long journey. We need to do with our client countries, and client countries need to do. And this tool is perhaps a guiding star on how to arrive to the ultimate goal of more efficient system thanks to digitalization. So thank you very much again, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Jamila, for these welcoming remarks and for reminding us that yes, there is a lot of potential, but it's also difficult and challenging to go on this digitalization journey. So with this, I believe we have the slide presentation coming up again. Thank you. So we'll now turn to the presentation of the actual playbook that will be presented by various distinguished speakers from the World Bank. First, there will be Tina George, the Senior Social Protection Specialist and Regional Task Team Leader with the Africa, West and Central region of the World Bank. She has a career in human development spanning 2 decades. Tina's work focuses on strengthening state capabilities and service delivery interventions for the poor and vulnerable. She brings a depth and breadth of experience in operations and analytics across regions, leading teams and driving transformational programs within complex political economy, and institutional contexts in over 60 countries. Notable recent projects include Togo's first IDA program for results to scale up the government's Novici program to cover all extreme poor, emphasizing women's digital financial inclusion and savings. She also co-led the first regional multi-phase programmatic approach operation covering Benin, Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea, Niger, Togo, and the ECOWAS Commission, winning the President's Award for Excellence. Previously, she served as a global co-lead for social protection delivery systems. She has authored several publications, including the Playbook on Digital Social Protection Delivery Systems towards Dynamic Inclusion and Interoperability that we are launching today. After that, we'll hear from Luis Albero, who's Senior Social Protection Specialist at the World Bank with over 15 years of experience in social protection delivery systems, poverty, and financial inclusion. He previously served as Director General of Geostatistics and Beneficiary Registries in Mexico, where he led the implementation of an interoperable social information system, consolidating a social registry with an integrated beneficiary registry and a spatial data infrastructure. Before that, he worked as a financial inclusion researcher at Mexico's central bank, and he implemented a G2P payment system through a network of rural banking agents for the conditional cash transfer program Oportunidades, supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He holds a bachelor's degrees in mathematics and economics from the University of Chicago, as well as a master's in public administration in international development from Harvard Kennedy School. Then we will also hear from Ana Lucia Cardenas, social protection consultant at the World Bank, who has over 8 years of experience in West Africa and Latin America in the areas of digital social protection delivery systems, social assistance, jobs, youth employment, and monitoring and evaluation. Prior to joining the bank, Ana worked as monitoring director at the Ministry of Social Development in Mexico, where she monitored and supervised the evaluation of nationally rolled out social protection programs to support evidence-based decision-making. Ana Lucia holds a master's degree in public politics and development from Toulouse School of Economics in France, and a bachelor's degree in economics from Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León in Mexico. And finally, Konrad Dali, Senior Counsel, Human Development and Technology in the World Bank's Legal Vice Presidency Operations Policy Unit, LEGOP. He has over 15 years of experience at the intersection of human development and technology. His work has been diverse, but with a focus on the legal, institutional, and governance aspects needed to strengthen state capabilities, especially in instances of data sharing and systems interoperability. More particular areas of expertise include data protection and digital privacy, cyber law, identification and identity management, governance and anti-corruption, justice reform, and arbitration and mediation counseling. He has been a delegate before the United Nations, helping to elaborate the UNCITRAL model law on the use and cross-border recognition of identity management and trust services, MLIT. He was also secretary for the International Mediation Institute, IMI, Investor State Mediation Task Force for over 6 years. He is dual US and French educated attorney with a Juris Doctor and Master 1 and 2 from Cornell Law School and the École de Droit de la Sorbonne, University Paris, respectively. And after these really impressive biographies, I'm very happy to now turn it over to Tina for the substance that we're really waiting for, the presentation of the playbook. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica, for that wonderful introduction, and to Yamile for that absolutely amazing framing, which speaks to all of us. So live from Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, where our team happens to be on mission in West Africa, we are delighted to present the new interagency social protection assessment tool, the Playbook on Digital Social Protection Delivery Systems, towards dynamic inclusion and interoperability. And this has been done under the aegis of SPIAC-B, the Interagency Coordination Board for Social Protection Agencies. The playbook has been in the making since 2018, and between 2019 and 2023, and through the pandemic too, it was refined through several rounds of reviews and consultations with members of the Digital Social Protection Working Group. And a final round was hosted in Bonn very kindly by GIZ, where in-depth discussions were held with ILO, FAO, WFP, ADB, ISA, UNICEF, IPC, EC, and socialprotection.org. All of these suggestions were incorporated and circulated internally within the World Bank for a final decision review in 2024. Next slide, please. So the playbook is really steeped in the context of our present times, and including long-term global challenges such as climate change, fragility, conflict, violence, weak governance, and a compounding crisis. A staggering 670 million people, that's about 8.4% of the population of the world, endure extreme poverty. And the Sustainable Development Goal on ending extreme poverty by 2030 requires bold global action and innovation on all of our parts. These global challenges have far-reaching consequences for productivity and economic growth, and there's evidence of divestment from human capital at critical moments of people's life cycle and reversals in poverty declines. And despite these trials, we believe that this is a time of great possibility to do things differently for social protection programs to adapt and to shift gears. And the accelerating growth in technology offers us a unique opportunity to rapidly scale up and coordinate the delivery of social protection throughout the life cycle of people and families, and also in their times of need. Next slide, please. The source book on the foundations of social protection delivery systems, which was also a labor of love for the social protection practice at the World Bank, it identified coordination and inclusion as two intractable and perennial challenges of social protection systems. Social protection programs focus on multiple population groups, and they all have divergent needs and vulnerabilities throughout their life cycle. Some prioritize maternity or early childhood, while others support youth, youth at risk, disabled, or elderly. Now, when systems are built to be dynamic, when they're inclusive, and when they facilitate the coordination of various actors across government, they place vulnerable people at the heart of design and delivery of programs, as Yamile had so rightly said. Now, building digital social protection systems to be interoperable across government, that enables the articulated delivery of social protection policies and helps exploit the complementarities and to reduce redundancies as well. Next slide, please. We developed the conceptual framework of the playbook by starting with the three fundamental levels of social protection: policies, programs, and delivery systems. And building from these layers, we identified 5 core characteristics: data used and produced by the digital social protection platforms, how they interact along the delivery chain, the technologies used to develop such systems, their governance, and their performance. Next slide. Now, a salient and underlying message of the playbook, again, to Yamile's point, was that digital social protection delivery systems, they cannot operate in a vacuum, and they're not the end in itself, they are a means to an end. And so it's really important to keep in mind the bigger picture across the 3 fundamental levels of social protection. So if we start with the policy level, we see that national social protection policies are crucial to define medium and long-term goals. For instance, a country might decide to establish a certain consumption floor, or to foster human capital formation, or to generate resilience to shocks. And based on these policies, an institutional architecture is defined that creates the mandates for these programs across government lines. Now, within the program level, individual programs, they work towards the objectives that were previously defined by the policy architecture. And by doing so, they define very specific eligibility criteria, the coverage targets, and the actual interventions to be delivered to reach those objectives. So for instance, you might have a program on productive cash transfers, and that has eligibility criteria that's based on a consumption threshold, or a program on universal healthcare for informal workers, and so on. At the delivery systems level, digital social protection delivery systems use those eligibility criteria, the coverage targets, the data to facilitate the delivery of these interventions defined by programs in order to reach the intended policy objectives. Slide, please. And this brings us to our big chart, which is digital social protection delivery systems. We see this as a whole of government systems building framework for delivering social protection in a progressively digital world. It encompasses digital unique identity, dynamic social registries, beneficiary operations managements, payments platforms that are multi-program, multi-provider, integrated beneficiary registries, grievance redress mechanisms, case management systems, among others. And just as different gears of an engine must mesh perfectly together to transfer power and to make the engine work, the digital social protection delivery systems components are calibrated to work together seamlessly and to ensure smooth and uninterrupted flow of information and to enable the improved delivery of social protection to people. Now, what does this help with? It helps governments answer several fundamental questions. Who is who? That is, are you who you say you are? Who is in need? Where are they located? And who has received some form of assistance, and how will they be paid? Now, this has to function in low-tech environments. It recognizes the digital divide. It is context-specific and is deployable in a culturally appropriate manner. And in this sense, it goes far beyond digital. It is foundational in nature and holistic in approach, and limits exclusion, especially for the poor and vulnerable, and for those with limited to no internet access. To this end, the Playbook is a compendium. It is composed of a guidance note and an assessment tool. It is designed for policymakers and practitioners in low and middle income countries. It takes an interdisciplinary approach on economics, legal, governance, data, process, and technology aspects. The guidance note provides a conceptual framework, so it's really a roadmap to guide the future state or the to-be state of where we want to go. And the assessment tool, that helps assess the strengths and the weaknesses of the current state of the component parts with a focus on dynamic inclusion and interoperability. It's important to note that the Playbook is not prescriptive, and neither is it restrictive. It's flexible and can be adapted to different country contexts. Now, while we mostly address non-contributory programs, it could be extrapolated to contributory schemes as well. It's not meant to be read end to end. It can be used by different audiences to review the different parts. And subject matter experts could refer to the data, the performance, the delivery chain, the governance, or the technology aspects. Next slide, please. Okay, let's stay with the slide then. So this presentation is structured into several parts. We'll have a section on data, and that's going to be presented by Luis. A section on the delivery chain, performance, and technology, and that will be done by Anna. A section on governance, which will be done by Conrad. And then, as Veronica was saying, we will follow this with a discussion with our wonderful co-collaborators from the World Food Program, from GIZ, and with you, Veronica, from the ILM. Over to Luis.
Thank you, Tina. Having seen the big picture of digital social protection delivery systems, we will now zoom into the components of this ecosystem and their core functions. Starting with unique identifiers, unique IDs are foundational because they establish an individual's uniqueness and authenticate individuals. Foundational IDs are based on a minimal set of biographic and biometric attributes used to produce a unique ID that is shared across DSPDS. This unique ID is one of the prerequisites for different component systems to talk to each other without which it would be close to impossible to have true interoperability. Also, civil registration and vital statistics play an important role in order to attribute legal identity and to report the recurrence of vital events such as births and deaths. We move forward to the next component system, which is dynamic social registries, or DSRs. DSRs provide a unique gateway for households and individuals to apply to multiple programs on demand. Social registries are not the only way to do this. There are others, but they are commonly used in low and middle income countries, especially with high shares of informal workers. A key attribute of dynamic social registries is that they can dynamically intake data from multiple sources and consolidate it, facilitated by an interoperability framework with data security and data protection safeguards. Ensuring that unregistered households can register on demand and that the data of registered households is kept as up to date as possible is a primary concern of dynamic social registries, relative to more static social registries that operate mostly through administrative-driven sweeps every 3, 4, or 5 years. As such, keeping data up to date is key in order for dynamic social registries to provide the best assessment of needs and conditions possible and to determine potential eligibility based on the eligibility criteria set by programs. The next component system that we'll discuss are beneficiary operation management systems, also called program MISs or BOMs, as well as integrated beneficiary registries. BOMs or program MISs are program-specific systems used to manage their operations such as enrolling, determination of benefits, preparing and reconciliating payrolls, monitoring conditionalities, and others. On the other hand, integrated beneficiary registries consolidate beneficiary registries from each of the program MIS or BOMs in order to keep track of who has received what. IBRs are meant to act mostly as a coordination tool in order to avoid overlaps and reduce redundancies amongst programs by providing policymakers a full view on what individuals and households have received one or more programs. Moving forward, we have multi-program, multi-provider payments platforms. These are government-to-person or person-to-government payment systems that automate back-end payments for multiple programs and across multiple platforms. As such, they provide more freedom to beneficiaries to choose their preferred financial service provider and access points, helping to improve thus financial inclusion. We won't go too much in detail because there is already a NISTA tool that I invite you to read. Data exchange platforms are another core component system discussed in the playbook. They act as trusted intermediaries and facilitate the seamless flow of information across other component systems that we've covered. In a sense, data exchange and interoperability is really what holds it all together. There are many ways to ensure interoperability, but it will usually depend on establishing standardized protocols and secure channels for data exchange. As such, for example, the work that is done with the Digital Convergence Initiative is key for establishing those standardized protocols. And finally, some of the other systems discussed in the playbook that we won't go in detail include case management information systems, geographic information systems, data analytics platforms, program inventories, grievance redress mechanisms, among others. Now, having established this ontology for the component systems in the playbook, we will now discuss a bit more on the data that is used and produced by them. Data is really a core input and output of the digital social protection delivery systems that we've discussed. Because of the old saying that garbage in and garbage out is important, it is important to understand how those data are structured, sourced, and processed. The data consumed and produced by DSPDS are meant to represent either an underlying socioeconomic condition, such as being poor or food insecure, or a demographic attribute, such as being a child or a pregnant mother, or to record transactions, such as receiving a benefit or a service. As such, the data is processed through a series of data pipelines along the different stages of the delivery chain. Starting with the intake and registration, socioeconomic information on registrants is consolidated by social registries, which serves as the basis for the assessment of needs and conditions and to determine potentially eligible populations, which are then enrolled by the programs according to their specific eligibility criteria. Once benefits have been determined and allocated through the BOMS or program MAS, beneficiary rosters are produced and provided to the payments platforms or service provision platforms, which then delivers the actual payment or service and produces reconciliated payment reports. These reconciliated reports are then used to update the beneficiary registries, which then can be consolidated by the integrated beneficiary registry. Now, if we try to abstract and generalize how data is structured within these pipelines, the pipelines of these platforms, we can identify three basic sets of data: a biographic data set, a socioeconomic data set, and a benefits management data set. This is, of course, an abstraction meant to simplify, but we think it can be useful in order to organize the data that flows with these different component systems. For illustration purposes, here we show it as an Excel sheet, even if that's not how it works in the back end of data management systems. In terms of the contents, the biographic data sets contains the basic biographic attributes of each individual and its unique ID. This is the job of the unique ID platform. The socioeconomic data set groups multiple individuals into households and attaches a number of socioeconomic attributes to those households and individuals, including welfare proxies, access to services, and others. And as you can see, this is the data set that is used by social registries to assess the needs and conditions of potential beneficiaries. Finally, benefits management data sets constitute the basis for the beneficiary registries generated by the BOMS and then eventually integrated by the IBR, which are more transactional in nature. Beyond the specific contents of the data sets, modularity and minimalism are key attributes needed to facilitate the dynamic updating of this data, particularly for the socioeconomic data set. Now, think of these data sets as big buckets. What you put into these buckets can come from multiple sources. For DSRs, there are two main sources of data to consider, each with different trade-offs. On the one hand, you have data that can be directly collected by administering self-report questionnaires. This is usually the basis for most social registries, but it can also be the most expensive data source in terms of resources and time needed to collect such data. And it can be subject to under or over-reporting biases, whether intentional or not. On the other hand, social registries can use indirectly collected data, such as administrative records, or more novel non-traditional data, such as call detailed records, to complement or verify self-report questionnaires. These indirectly collected data can come from a variety of administrative record systems, such as tax systems, property, or vehicle registries, for instance. Indirectly collected data can be cheaper to produce and might be less subjective, but also has less coverage. That's all from my side, and I'll hand over to Mike.
Thank you, Luis, and greetings from Abidjan. So in this section of the playbook, we will look at how digital social protection delivery systems, or DSPDS, support different stages of the delivery chain. And throughout these stages, we see how people and programs interact, and in these interactions are facilitated by technology and data, which are the object of the playbook. Some of these interactions are naturally program specific. However, there are other interactions that are common across programs. And in this chapter, we explore how some of these interactions can be integrated in order to improve efficiency for administrators and also to improve access and convenience for people. So the next slide, please. Okay, and outreach is typically the first point of contact between people and programs. It is critical for DSPDS to increase understanding and awareness about how the data and the technology can be used to facilitate access to programs. Outreach strategies can also help us correct some misinformation or biases that could potentially affect the acceptance or take-up of these innovations. And also, very interestingly, within a DSPDS framework, the information that is contained in the information systems that are part of the DSPDS framework can be used and leveraged to support outreach and communication. So, for example, you can use some data to send targeted messages to potentially eligible households and individuals to invite them to join the program, to register. Next slide, please. In the next stage of in the delivery chain is that the intake of data and the registration to programs to be considered for potential eligibility. And many countries, as Luis was mentioning, use social registries at this stage. However, others choose different approaches, like specific modules within a program, bonds or MIS, or can make direct requests to administrative systems. However, in this publication, we will focus on dynamic social registries. And key aspects that I wanted to draw your attention to are that dynamic social registries serve multiple programs and offer a single gateway for people to access to more than one program at a time on an open and continuous basis. They are also able to intake data from different coexisting modalities, which you can see in the right-hand side of the figure. They range from in-person modalities to digital services and even interoperability with administrative and non-traditional data sources. And importantly, dynamic social registries are also designed with built-in mechanisms to keep data up to date for the assessment of needs and conditions. Can you go back? Sorry. And just very quickly, another key aspect I wanted to bring up in this discussion is that is the importance on how we define a household. The basic observation unit is typically an individual, but for many programs, the assistance unit are households. So how do we define a household is critical, because household composition is a very dynamic variable, and we need to be able to capture changes at the household level. So this is a key challenge, and there are certainly potential synergies that can be explored with the civil registry to be able to detect or capture deaths, births, marriages, and so on. Next slide, please. Okay, the next stage involves assessing needs and conditions for households and individuals, and this process is about profiling the needs and conditions of applicants and compare them to program eligibility criteria to determine potential entry to programs. There are different approaches to the assessment of needs and conditions. There is also a large literature on targeting methods. So while we do provide a summary on the playbook, I will not delve into this, but the key point I want to make is that dynamic social registries can have the functionality to determine potential eligibility for programs based on a set of algorithms that can be as simple as a categorical filter or more sophisticated, such as mean testing. And while the social registry makes this list of potential eligibility to programs, the decision is up to the program, right, to determine who is actually enrolled or not. So this implies that there is a data exchange protocol between the social registry, a dynamic social registry, and the program specific system. Next slide, please. Then the next stage is the provision of benefits and services. And given the scope of the playbook, and as Luis mentioned, there is a very interesting ISPA tool available. But very quickly, in terms of the systems that support this stage, we have the programs bonds or MIS, and a multi-program, multi-provider payments platform that are playing a key role to support the provision of benefits. And generally speaking, what happens is that programs create a payroll using their own system and exchange this information with the payment platform to disburse the payments. Once the payments have been disbursed, there are periodic payment reconciliation protocols that can potentially be performed in real time. And this is to allow and to confirm that the rightful beneficiaries were paid in the correct amounts. And the output of this process is a beneficiary registry, which can be integrated with other beneficiary registries and generate an integrated beneficiary registry, as Luis also commented on. Next slide, please. And then the next stage is the management of beneficiary operations, which is a program-specific activity, but within the DSPDS framework that we are proposing in the playbook. Component systems can interoperate with each other, and there are important synergies. We have mentioned a few already, and many have been documented in detail by the Digital Convergence Initiative, but we discussed briefly the links with civil registries to determine continuity in a program. There are also potential links with administrative data sources from the education or health sectors that can support programs in monitoring conditionalities or co-responsibilities. And in terms of grievance redress, many programs use their own specific grievance redress or complaints and appeal system, their own system, but there is a growing trend to create sectoral or national EGRM systems that improve the user's experience by having a single window where people can file and track any grievances or complaints for one or more programs. And when this is implemented, it requires some degree of interoperability between programs and cross-cutting EGRM information systems. The next slide, please. So moving on with the technological foundations of the DSPDS, I'm going to go very quickly through these slides, but the playbook offers a high-level architectural framework for digital social protection delivery systems that is informed on the principles of a human-centered design, verified data, interoperability, modularity, data security, and vendor neutrality. I invite you, of course, to check it out directly in the playbook where there is more information for a more technical audience. And some of the key elements of this architecture include the front office applications, which provide a visual interface for people and frontline social workers operating the application on behalf of people. Also, back office applications, which play a critical role in the digital social protection ecosystem, primarily serving program administrators. We also have database management systems where the information is housed and managed. And finally, data exchange mechanisms with other conduits through which data flows seamlessly among the various elements of the system, enabling the secure sharing of information across diverse platforms and systems. Then in the playbook, we also propose a framework to measure the performance of digital social protection delivery systems and how these systems can also be leveraged to measure the performance of the whole social protection system. So the SPDS act as invisible engines that empower programs to deliver results, ensuring more inclusive and efficient social protection with the ultimate goal of improving social outcomes and the impact of programs. So here we are proposing a theory of change, and also we include an annex with some specific performance indicators that can be used to measure on a continuous basis the performance of the SPDS component systems, and it covers it covers data, technology, processes, and institutions. Well, this is of course to be able to make better to use data for better decision making, increase transparency and accountability, and increase access to benefits and services and greater integration of functions. This, of course, will ultimately lead to better social outcomes when systems perform well and we're able to reach people when they need it. Their situation will improve. So with this, I hand it over to Conrad for the next session. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Anna. This section, it talks about governance. In order to make the whole of this DSPDS function and to empower people, the very whole of the system, the ecosystem, needs to be well governed. Governance is an overlay piece, and that's much of what is needed has already been touched upon. In order to have interoperability and to get the desired seamlessness, rules of the road, and also for where those roads are to be laid and common standards are needed. That is achieved through this governance piece. Achieving that aim requires both legal and technical elements. The aim of which is to set out a secure, efficient, responsive, and human-centric ecosystem. In order for the governance of the DSPDS to work, there need to be written legal texts and frameworks, as well as established institutions that are implementing those texts. The legal foundation should be rooted ideally in a foundational basis, in foundation legal documents and instruments, with regulations and other more granular instruments adding on to give more concreteness and tangibility to the regime. Those regulatory instruments need to be sufficiently detailed, clearly defined, and comprehensive, but neither should they be static nor rigid. It is particularly important that they define the roles and responsibilities, and that institutions operate as a result of this in a predictable and responsible manner. They should be structured so as to be people-centric and capable of adapting to the needs and the benefits of those who are interested. There will necessarily be a certain back and forth between institutions and applicants and beneficiaries, but also amongst all the other, or many of the other, stakeholders and actors on the back end and even front end. Process is important as a result, not only to the good governance management of the systems, but also for the process data, which we've heard extensively about. That process needs to be internally coherent, structured, and responsible among all stakeholders and all actors. It needs to be able to handle appropriately the back and forth that will necessarily ensue. This process can be managed in many ways, either in a centralized or decentralized manner. Doing so will improve efficiency, value, and delivery, while also boosting effectiveness and beneficiary well-being, and growing capacity both at the individual and at the institutional level. Next slide, please. It's important to recall there is no one-size-fits-all solution for institutional arrangements, or for legal ones for that matter as a whole. Good practices might be brought to bear, but the importance is that they should be able to adapt to their own context, to the country context and the program context, and that a cutting and pasting approach risks being reductionist and checklisty and is unlikely to actually result in good governance. Generalizable aspects exist, as is shown in these 4 areas on the screen of strategic, administrative, standard setting, and operation. It's important to highlight one important aspect is federal versus unitary states, which take significantly different approaches, but still have commonalities. Regardless of the country or context, there needs to be high-level whole of governance buy-in. That starts with the highest policy setting authorities and then trickles down. Having a high-level focal point helps to ensure transversality. Internal guided structures that clearly set up operational roles and active roles is essential. And the interface between back-end and front-facing DSP actors. In order to avoid resulting in a digital welfare dystopia, it is important to have elements such as eligibility criteria, how updating is done, periodicity, and many more of the beyond elements are made clear. This also helps to depoliticize services and benefits of delivery by having clear rules and procedures. Next slide, please. People are at the heart of social protection. However, in order for social protection to be effective, there will necessarily be the collecting and processing of personal data. The gears of the whole system, the ecosystem, operate along a data protection and privacy layer. Those are the tracks, if you will. Good governance principles generally help to set out the process. In keeping with the conceptual framework that the Playbook sets out, it's helpful if principles are anchored in broader law. However, even where there is not a broader law, these principles can be integrated in a program-specific manner. Consent is one of those key elements. It has a particular place, even if it is not the best single legal basis for which to root these programs. And because of the potential power mismatch and the dynamics at play that might undermine the giving of consent, it is important nonetheless to evoke that and to have it as an integrated piece. Regardless of whether the consent is the legal basis for collecting and processing the data, however, it is important that it plays a singular and important role in the whole ecosystem as it helps to empower the disempowered. Consent puts the individual at the heart of the program and gives them some added control over their data. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation on behalf of the team. Thank you very much for your attention, and we welcome any of your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much to the team of co-authors of the playbook. And just a quick reminder to everyone that please post any questions that you may have in the Q&A box. This is your unique opportunity to be interacting with the authors of this playbook. And with this, we'll now turn to our two great discussants. First of all, I would like to ask Anita, who is leading the GIZ work on the Digital Convergence Initiative, who works on the adoption of standards. From a GIZ perspective, how can governments use, adapt, or adopt the interoperability standards that are being developed through the Digital Convergence Initiative?
Thank you, Veronica, and to the ISPA team for giving this opportunity. I'll take a minute to first introduce the initiative, Digital Convergence Initiative, DCI for short. DCI is a working group under USP 2030, whose objective is to promote digital transformation and interoperability of social protection systems, and thus contribute to achieving the goal of universal social protection by 2030. This initiative has broadly three pillars of work. The first one is knowledge sharing through events like Talking Interoperability, where we deep dive into the technical interoperability aspects of social protection delivery systems, learning from countries, the best practices and their challenges, and also the interoperability in action workshops, where we demonstrate the power of interoperability of systems in delivering social protection services. The second pillar relates to standards development and, more importantly, consensus building on these standards for them to become global standards of interoperability. And the third pillar is on country implementation support for digital transformation and promoting interoperability in countries' social protection delivery systems. The European Commission has recently joined in funding this initiative, besides BMZ, which had been funding this for the last 2 years. And now with this funding, we are a strong team of 5 implementing partners with GIZ, ILO, World Bank, Expertise France, and FIA. Now, coming back to the question which Veronica asked me on how countries can use these standards, here I would say we have multiple ways in which this can be done. So the first would be they can take these standards from the DCI's public standards repository, which is on GitHub, because these standards are developed as digital public goods. They can put standards compliance requirements for their solutions in their solution products, in their procurements, which will ensure that the solutions they get are compliant with standards. And with standards to adopt, nothing better than global interoperability standards. The third option could be adopt these solutions which are standards compliant. The open source software solutions are digital public goods, which are standards compliant, as well as private sector solutions, which are standards compliant. When they are implemented in countries, They serve as a foundation of interoperable by birth, interoperable but by design systems that a country can use. We are working in very close, we are sort of co-creating these standards with digital public good solution providers, open source softwares, as well as private sector solution providers of different systems like civil registration, payments, social protection, social registry, etc. And we are also supporting the digital public goods to adopt these standards in their solutions. So for some existing systems which have been developed without these standards being available or without these standards adoption, there is still opportunity. Whenever there is enhancement of these solutions, they could adopt these standards and make these standards compliant so that in future they can mix and match components from different solution providers very easily because of the standards-based interoperability.
Thanks a lot for this insight into the work of the Digital Convergence Initiative. And I think we can really see the complementarity of the Playbook's emphasis on interoperability and other ongoing efforts to making interoperability work in practice. Can you describe the main challenges in the process of standard setting for interoperability, Anita?
Yes, so some of the challenges that I can think of, probably the first challenge would be that what Tina and other team members have already mentioned, the wide variety of social protection programs and the variations that exist across countries. So that itself is a big challenge to grapple with when we start looking for commonality of processes or data elements or services. Second is what we have found as we have embarked in this journey is limited technical expertise with countries as well as with development partners on people who can contribute to these standards development. And we also have limited resources that we can use to create this whole process of standards development, consensus building. But under DCI, we have been quite fortunate to get lots of collaboration and contribution from solution providers, international development partners, contributing their time pro bono for this digital public good. And I think Veronica herself is a Digital Convergence Initiative Steering Committee member. Feel free to add if you have some more points to these answers.
I'd love to, but I think in the interest of time, let's move ahead. So finally, what would you say, Anita? How can countries at early stages of development of their digital social protection delivery system leapfrog to an interoperable environment? What's the best starting point and what are the best pathways?
Thanks. And I think when you asked this question, the figure that came in my mind was the moving gears, which we saw in Tina's presentation, so beautifully moving in harmony. I felt they wouldn't have moved if they were not designed based on standards. If the gears protrusions were not fitting into each other, the wheels would not move smoothly. There would be a deadlock. And similar to that metaphor, if the different components, which Louis explained, need to work together for delivering social protection systems, they need to work in harmony. And that can happen only based on standards. So if countries want to have interoperable system and develop them, they have to adopt standards. So interoperability should not be an afterthought, but it should be the foundation to their design and development of delivery systems for social protection systems.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anita. Now let's turn to Andres. Can you tell us from the World Food Programme's humanitarian perspective, what are the main opportunities and challenges in building digital social protection delivery systems? And then also, how can food insecurity and other relevant metrics for humanitarian assistance be incorporated into the assessment of needs and conditions provided by dynamic social registries? And finally, can digital social protection delivery systems contribute to the nexus between humanitarian and development sectors, particularly in FCV settings through data exchange, linkages, and referrals? The floor is yours, Andres. Very simple questions that we're putting to you to solve. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, Anita, as well, for those interesting points on the DCI, the Digital Convergence Initiative, that we're also heavily engaged with and supporting. Very nice presentation, colleagues. First of all, I just wanted to say that this playbook and tool is very much needed and long-awaited playbook and practical assessment tool to better understand the situation of digital aspects of social protection programs and their delivery systems. Going back to these questions and points on the nexus, the relationship between food security and nutrition outcomes and social protection, and delivery on data exchanges and linkages and referrals. WFP has been working quite extensively in the nexus space as a dual mandate agency, precisely looking at the interface between humanitarian and development sectors. Some of the experiences so far in FCV settings is that governments are starting to build their social protection systems by initially scoping the synergies and capacities from existing emergency programs. And so development actors are already thinking how to leverage humanitarian responses, but also, very importantly, understanding what will happen with emergency assistance beneficiaries as well. That's another key point. WFP and other humanitarian actors are usually at these crossroads, helping make the linkages between different delivery chain components for system strengthening, including, for example, looking at how to select, identify, and register beneficiaries for both emergency and development programs, but also how to digitalize those government programs more broadly. We expect the nature and volume of the work in the Nexus to increase over time, actually, unfortunately, in specific regions, of course, and that necessitates technological solutions and MISs, management information systems, that do no harm, of course, that protect beneficiaries' data privacy that was mentioned in the presentation, and that leave no one behind. This playbook and assessment tool can help in identifying opportunities and challenges in FCD contexts, context of fragility, conflict, and violence. Understanding those issues well and what is needed by both humanitarian and development actors will help improve the overall efficiency and effectiveness of both sectors, humanitarian and development sectors and actors. And for this interface to work effectively, data exchanges and linkages and referrals need to be assessed as well. And this was central to the presentation of colleagues just now, and which is precisely what this tool will help us all with. Moving into the issue of food security and nutrition and social protection, we've been working increasingly more on the intersection between social protection and food security and nutrition outcomes. What we've seen so far is that household structures have changed, first with COVID a couple of years ago, and more recently with the global food crisis in 2022, high food prices, disruption of supply chains, and so on. And MISs and digitalization efforts would need to be adjusted to new shifting and competing priorities and new emerging needs of the populations. Just final thought, final idea is that I would like to emphasize that leave no one behind is a guiding principle of UN agencies, including WFP, of course, in the countries where we work. And these types of tools would help governments and their partners reassess needs, identify new emerging vulnerabilities, which is key, understanding better the relationship between the poor, the food insecure, the vulnerable, and overall help address inequalities more broadly. I think I managed to capture most of the points and from the questions. Thank you. Over to you, Veronica.
Indeed, thanks a lot. And thanks also in finishing off this complex discussion. On a positive note, with optimism also that digital technologies indeed can help us to face many of these challenges, especially at a time where we can expect to have to work more in fragile conflict and vulnerable settings, and where nexus work will become increasingly important. With this, we have received already many questions in the Q&A boxes that our authors are already busy answering in writing, but I think some of these we have some time left for discussing some of these also online. There were a lot of questions around the technicalities and practicalities of designing and implementing these interoperable and digital social protection delivery systems. Questions around what are common unique identifiers, around who should be the entity responsible for hosting or and managing databases. Where should biometric information be stored? And I think, I mean, I think I'll stop here and then we'll open to a second round of questions. I don't know who maybe wants to respond to some of these issues, and I'm not sure whether you're also reading the questions in the chat, but Luis or Conrad, perhaps? Or I think you're still on, yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no, we were just agreeing amongst ourselves which question we would start with. So maybe over to Luis, and we'll go not in order maybe on the questions. Okay.
Thanks, Tina. Yes, there was a great question on sort of the different roles of social registries and unique ID systems, such as foundational IDs or CRBS systems, and whether should countries invest more on one or the other. I see these two types of platforms having different roles, but different complementary roles. Foundational unique IDs usually collect very basic biographic and biometric attributes that are not usually enough to be able to do an assessment of needs and conditions, which is the function of the social registry. That said, I agree that there's a gradual shift towards universal programs, and that is, in my mind, not incompatible with social registries. For example, categorical programs still need a list of households, a list of individuals that are grouped into households, and that is something that is usually done by social registries. Now, in terms of the sequencing, you probably do need to prioritize unique IDs in terms of in what order do you invest into these systems, because it will be very hard to have a good social registry without a unique ID. So in terms of the sequencing, I think starting with the unique IDs makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe I will take the question, which we did answer in writing, but I can pick up where Luis left off in terms of the unique identifiers and what is best. So there's never a best, and there's never an answer on best. I think the good practices are to have minimal attributes in terms of collection of data. The objective or the end goal is to make sure that you are truly who you say you are, that this individual is unique, and we're going to be able to track this individual or even the household, that the household is a unique household as well, to be able to track them across programs. So we see what are the gaps and overlaps, and potentially what are some additional programs that that household or that those households' needs might require as well. So that's really the foundation if we think about it. So there's, in terms of the good practices, I would also encourage you to look at the work of the Identification for Development Initiative that puts out a lot of the good practices on how to build foundational unique identification systems, how to bring that into the digital space, and in terms of authentications and service delivery. Let me then pass on to Anna, if there are any questions that you would like to take on.
Sure, thanks, Tina. Well, I answered a question on how countries get started, I'm sorry, I lost the question. How can countries with multiple programs and delivery systems start implementing interoperability approaches effectively? There's not really a one-size-fits-all response. Countries can undergo different pathways to building these systems. So what we are proposing in the playbook is using the assessment tool, which I think really provides a good starting point to identify what are the gaps and the opportunities to build these systems. And then there was another question on indicators to assess the effectiveness of digital social protection delivery systems in low and middle income countries. Given the complexity of these systems, we are also proposing different ways to measure their performance. I would say coverage is coverage and inclusion are key indicators to look out for, but also on the technology side, whether the technology is actually accessible, whether it is designed with a human-centered design approach in mind, whether the systems are efficient, whether data are protected or not, and other aspects related to data exchange. So I would finish my responses there.
Sweet, thanks, Anna. So maybe let me just put a question to Conrad in terms of the good practices in terms of minimum requirements in terms of data security and privacy, and also there's a question on using data for the wrong reasons, which is a very sensitive question and a very good question that maybe we can weigh in on as well. So Conrad, maybe after you we will take on that question. So over to you for data privacy.
Thanks, Tina. Let me start by something that I mentioned earlier, and that's discussed robustly in the playbook, which is that there is no one right way to do this. And this actually goes to the first question as well about who should be in charge of data storage and where the social registry is. There's no one way to do it, but there are general principles that could and should be applied. How you go about doing it depends on a number of factors. First, what type of state you are. Second, what legal instruments are already in place from a constitutional basis, but also a data protection law. And then, even if those elements are not there, we have good generalized data protection principles that can be applied to a program-specific approach. So to directly take on the piece about how do you prevent government, or especially government, data in a social registry from being used for the wrong reasons, it's important to clearly delineate what reasons those data should be used for, and then institutionally where they will be. So ideally, you do not put everything together. Certainly, you do not put the identifiers and the identification information of which we've spoken, especially if it's biometric, all in with the socioeconomic data. The system and the authority managing the data on identification should be housed separately. It should be in a different, everything from the socioeconomic data that's in social registry But reciprocally, or continuing that chain, the programs should have their own data, and there should be controls as to how all of those systems interoperate, and they shouldn't be integrated. There is no one way to prevent use against wrong reasons, but by setting up clear roads and clear routes through which transactions can be made and engagement had, it can be largely mitigated. And that's without talking about the institutional pieces, including regulators, including capacity building, including community engagement, and some of the other elements that we mentioned by and the other discussants earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Conrad. Luis, did you want to come in, and or should I just take this very quickly and then turn it over to you? So I think another a really important element to consider here is that you know, in designing these systems, we should be going by the do no harm approach, or in advising governments to design the systems, because the governments are in the driver's seat, and our role is as advisors coming in, you know, with good practices and examples and inspirations from different countries. So the advice is really in terms of how to set that up in the framework of the laws and the regulations and the institutional capabilities in order to then have the operational capabilities for data protection and privacy, and to operationalize for people to be able to complain or to be able to get grievance redress from the system. So there's a whole framework that needs to come together. But ultimately, you know, we provide the advice to governments in these contexts. I think there are, I'm going to link it to one of the other questions on the inspiration. What are some of the good practice countries and the examples that we drew on for the playbook? I think there was a question on that. You know, maybe we can talk about the Chile, Turkey examples as well, and some of the others, Colombia, some of the others that we drew on. Would anybody like to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned a few of them. I think some of the most interoperable systems that we analyzed, as you said, are Chile. They have a social registry that is heavily interoperable with a very rich set of administrative data sources. They have a unique ID that is enabling that interoperability with administrative data sources, and they also have a beneficiary registry, an integrated beneficiary registry, interconnected. Turkey is another example, sort of similar to Chile. Brazil, I would say, is also an example of a dynamic social registry that has really been able to put into place on-demand registration, on-demand intake and registration through decentralized data collection. And they're also striving towards interoperability with other administrative data sources. So I think those are some of the examples.
Thank you, Luis. And if I may say so, the playbook, again, is structured as a guidance note and as an assessment toolkit. And so, you know, there's no one size fits all where we see that any one country is able to do all of these things. So in some sense, it's offering a vision of where we would like to be in being able to address some of these big global challenges that, you know, that form the context in which we are working in. And so to that end, the assessment toolkit, as rolled out in a country to look at where are you currently in terms of all of these different component parts, or those modular parts that big framework showed. If you can look at where you are and then be able to compare that to that future state, and that future state may be drawn, it's a composite that's drawn from many, many different examples. So for instance, one country might do one specific component really well, another country might do another component really well. And so it's really looking at a composite future state and then looking at the assessment. So that's another aspect that I might bring in. Over to Conrad for the next one.
Thanks, Tina. I just want to add on briefly to what Sina and Luis said. Especially around the institutional and the governance and support to keep in mind country context. And there are many ways of doing things, and it is not necessarily what works best in one country is not necessarily the best in another. So we spoke of specific countries. Argentina, for example, has done an interesting and very good job of creating a means of connecting its server registries, which had been used much more so as a source of identification, but creating an interoperable super layer, if you will, central layer that based on the unique identifier, but is rooted in each of those systems. Doing so recognizes the cultural heritage. It's not imposing another system from another place. And the opposite direction I'd show from, the opposite form, is looking at, for instance, regional bodies. So the European Union uses a certain architecture to achieve things that crosses cultures. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I turn one question over to Andres, a couple of questions over to Andres, I think, who, before we go back? There are some questions that have come in for you, Anna.
Yes, so maybe let's, they are also already answered in writing, but there were indeed two addressed to Andres on the humanitarian. So one was around linkages programmatically that we can establish as nexus between humanitarian and development sectors. And then there was another one on the process for systems to be integrated so that they can be used by a variety of different humanitarian agencies. Andres, do you quickly want to recap your written answer?
Yeah, thanks. I was replying in the chat, but I think, yeah, let me say just a couple of things on that. Yeah, pragmatically or practically, some of those linkages, because we speak a lot about these linkages, the interface, and what that practically means, is precisely work around data exchanges, which is what I like from that main figure that colleagues presented at the central cog. Is precisely where we need to work more, and that is the interface or the space in the nexus, in the humanitarian development nexus, that needs to be clarified and unpacked. How are those end-to-end data exchanges going to happen between humanitarian actors or programs and social protection programs or development programs, but also thinking about that vice versa, no? What's going to happen? How can the humanitarian responses and humanitarian programs benefit from the investments in the social sectors, in the social protection sector? So elucidating, clarifying how those data exchanges are going to happen, going to take place. What are the institutional arrangements that are needed between government and perhaps non-government entities is one, all the while protecting beneficiaries' privacy and so on. So that's I think this is at the center, and that cog on data exchanges is central to all of these dynamics between the humanitarian and development sectors. Something we need to pay more attention to.
Excellent, thank you. I don't know whether there are any final words of wisdom that the presenters want to share with the audience before we move to the closing.
Thank you. So I think there's one question on KPIs, which maybe we can bounce to Anna to answer, and then there's one more on cross-border, which I could potentially take, and then there's a final one that maybe we should answer immediately, which is, it's not a software, it's not an open source software. It is a framework to think about how to assess your current state of where you are and the future state. But over to Anna for the question on the performance indicator.
Yeah, just to add to that response, Tina, the framework can leverage existing open source software that can be put together and be applied in the framework that we're proposing. So it builds on digital public goods as well. Yeah, no, just to maybe complement, I had mentioned this earlier. but we can, there are different metrics to measure the performance of digital social protection delivery systems along the dimensions of data, delivery chain, technology, governance, and institutions. So on data, it would be important to assess the strengths and weaknesses of the different types of data sources and the data that is contained on these systems, and make sure that they provide the necessary inputs for policy making. On the delivery chain or processes I mentioned, well, it's key to measure whether the processes are effective and efficient, and taking into account whether they are inclusive enough or not, and whether they are covering the population that they should be covering. On the technology side, we're proposing as well some indicators to assess the system's integrity and whether the system performed its intended functions in a secure way. And on the governance side, we assess whether institutional and legal arrangements are also enabling the secure, well, whether they are in place and whether they are enabling the secure and timely collection and processing and sharing and destruction of the data. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. So on cross-border interoperability, do you want to say a few words, Conrad? Or? Okay. Anna, thank you for that question on cross-border interoperability. Indeed, that is an initiative and a project that's very close to our hearts, and in which we are aiming to implement or support governments to implement here in West Africa with the WURI program, to be regionally interoperable across borders for Benin, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Niger, Togo, along with the ECOWAS Commission. And so, you know, we do have some observations. Perhaps there's not enough time to go into that, but this is certainly something that, you know, we could discuss further. In regards to utilizing unique identifiers and to be able to exchange that information, exchange yes or no responses across borders, for instance, to say this person is indeed who they say they are, for instance, to contribute to social insurance programs, because you might be a migrant farm worker who is working temporarily in a specific country and then contributing maybe into a program where the account is in the other country. So there are lots of different ways in which cross-border would apply. I just want to say one piece on the digital public goods as well. And thank you, Anna, for absolutely for the reminder. For instance, for the foundational unique identifiers, you have the MOSIP platform, which many of our countries are using, OpenCRVS for civil registration, the OpenIMIS platform, which is hosted by GIZ, you know, along with the core MIS. And so there's really a lot of many different kinds of public goods that incorporate many of these principles. And so this is providing that overall modular framework for how to think about the design and the building of these programs. But over to you, Conrad, on cross-border.
Just a quick point on what Tina said. In building the cross-border piece, we don't need and would advise against creating a central data authority that is collecting. Data doesn't leave the country in question. It's a verification, as Tina said. So the question goes from country A at whatever point of service to the authority via whatever that means in country B. And the response of a yes, no, or error is sent back without the data ever leaving. Therefore, we're not trying to create and would advise strongly against creating any authority that across borders would be collecting and amassing all of this data. And as we said earlier, amassing of data as a whole is a rule that as a rule we would steer clear of. Thanks.
Thanks, Conrad. Veronica, maybe we're running out of time, but
yes, indeed. There's still questions trickling in, but I think we've covered the vast majority of them. In the interest of time, I think let's perhaps wrap up. It's a bit difficult to summarize this very rich discussion. If anything, I think we've proven Jamila right in the beginning when he said it is a little bit complex and difficult. But I think indeed what the playbook does is that it presents a very good framework that really dissects these different elements in a very user-friendly way and in a very accessible way, because it is a complex issue that we're talking about, but the playbook really makes this accessible. Starting from Tina's observation that the digital social protection delivery structure is just a means to an end to deliver on what the social protection policy and related national legislation promise in terms of social protection entitlements. So there is a policy vision of this is the social protection we want to provide to our people, and the digital social protection delivery systems enable you to do this hopefully more effectively and efficiently. And for this, the key piece is how the related data and information travels through the system along the delivery chain. And this is compartmentalized and put together again very well in the playbook. So starting from the who are you, who you say you are, that's the question that Tina asked in the very beginning, to what are your needs? How can we verify that you're eligible for this benefit? How can we provide the payment? How can you submit any complaints or appeals in case something went wrong along the delivery chain? And how can we measure the performance overall? And this for the different combination of schemes and programs that exist in the social protection landscape. And very importantly, this comes at the end, but Konrad said very rightly, the overarching governance framework could also be presented at the beginning. And this came out in the questions also. We need data security, we need confidentiality of private information, we need to adhere to certain principles to make sure that this functions smoothly, that each entity is aware of their responsibilities and rights, that the government can be held accountable for what is being done. And so that we need not just the social protection legislation, but we also need a legal and governance framework for how this delivery system is managed and operates, and the related performance indicators. And these are precisely the different building blocks that you can find in the playbook around the data, the underlying technology, the governance framework, and how to measure performance. So I think one key message that is important also is that governments cannot afford not to do anything about this. Digitalization is happening in all our spheres of life. It's important to start thinking about how you can make best use in your specific context. And that was another very strong message. Konrad said it several times. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, but there is a suitable pathway that can be identified for each country on how to move and start building and strengthening their delivery systems to better meet the social protection needs of the population. With this, I would like to thank you so much for your interest and for coming to and following this webinar. And we invite you all to take a look at the book, come back to us with further questions if you have any. And yeah, thanks for listening in, and bye everyone.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Andres, Anita, and to sp.org for this wonderful opportunity to present the playbook. Bye from all of us in Abidjan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.